everyone. I'll say good morning. It's morning over here. I'm starting this podcast series to get us exam ready for the AAAF paper that will be coming up in a few days' time. Excuse me. All right, so we'll be looking at chapter 12 today, which is assurance services. And we have some questions for the last 10 diets down from May 2025 to March, July 2020. We have some questions we'll be looking at. We'll be speaking to them practically. So you can see my screen. For the month of May, or the diet May 2025, he did not test this, the concepts and applications or principles of assurance services. Same as November 2024, May 2024, November 2023. Then down to May 2023, we have this question on new audit client, which is question 2. So let's go to the question and start immediately. The question reads it's quite a short read, so let's go through it. There is an indication of increasing application of technology in the business and commercial world. A lot of activities are now carried out on a real-time basis, and payments are gradually reducing the use of checks. Your new audit client is one of the companies that has recently enhanced their business settings with respect to receipts and payments. The previous auditor has little depth in information and communication technology, despite the growing trend. The client's management also thinks that its performance in the past has been inadequately reported due to the complicity of the key accounting staff and inadequacies of the previous auditor. The client is therefore considering its options in the circumstances required. A. Discuss the challenges encountered in the provision of assurance engagement on electronic commerce systems and the approach to address these challenges, 8 marks. B. Evaluate the ethical principles that will be relevant in the conduct of forensic investigation of this client and the considerations the accountant needs to, bear in mind in such an assignment, 7 marks. For proper conclusion of the exercise, set out the reporting requirements of an assurance engagement, 5 marks. All right, so we have a 20-mark question here before us, ladies and gentlemen. And I think it's a fantastic question set for demonstrating how to maximize marks by following, I think, the exam strategy, which is very close. And the question covers 3 distinct high-level topics in this chapter: e-commerce assurance, forensic ethics, and assurance reporting, which are core and cardinal areas of this topic or this chapter on assurance services. All right, so you look at the question, general observations on each question. The part A, which is on e-commerce, tests the application of audit fundamentals, speaking about risks, about controls, about planning, to a modern technology-driven business model. And if you look at the answer for the A part, you will observe that the answer correctly highlights the risks inherent in technology and also the need for specialists, the need for outsourcing, the need for integrity, and the corresponding audit approach. If we look at the examiner's report, which we want to look at, let's look at what the examiner opined. The examiner's report noted a poor understanding, which is below average, of e-commerce, making detailed specific points very crucial. All right, so the examiner's report for the exams is below average, so take note of that. Then the B part asks us to evaluate. That's the prompt, evaluate. Take note of the prompt. The B part, which is on forensic ethics, tests the ethical principles relevant to a specialized investigation role, which is forensic accounting, which differs from statutory audits. And the key is recognizing the heightened risks to objectivity, categorically advocacy threat, and the special legal status of confidentiality, which is duties to the court and legal privilege. So the B part, if you look at the answer, speaks to forensic ethics very practically. So let's look at the C part, which is for proper conclusion, set out the reporting requirements of an assurance engagement. So if you observe this C part, which is on reporting, this is a purely memorization and procedural question based on the requirements of the international standards on assurance engagement. And if you look at the answer, the C part, it actually lists the required elements of a formal assurance report. Okay, so those are my general observations on the question. Let's speak to the question and see how to answer such a question under exam condition. So what do you write and how do you write each question briefly? Don't forget, under exam condition, your challenge should be what to write and how to write it, so you could glean and pick the marks very seamlessly. So for the part A, speaking about the challenges and the approach, which is 8 marks. What do you write? Start with the challenges. You need to focus on unique technology. You need to focus on unique technology. The answer is on the screen. You need to focus on unique technology. Speaking to specialized knowledge or specialist knowledge. Speaking to outsourcing. Talking about capitalization of costs. Then move to the approach. And also focus, speaking to the approach, focus on core planning activities adapted for information technology around acceptance, around specialist staff, around risk evaluation, control testing, and the likes. So how do you write that? Use 2 distinct number sessions for challenges and for the audit approach. So provide at least 4 challenges and at least 6 approaches to ensure you meet the marks allocated for this part of the question. So 3 challenges and 5 approaches should earn you 8 marks very seamlessly. So for the B part, what do you write and how do you write it? Now for the B part, you need to list and explain the 5 core ethical principles, which is integrity, objectivity, competence, confidentiality, and professional behavior as they relate to an investigation. So as they relate to an investigation, not just your knowledge of those 5 core principles. After doing that, then you focus on the considerations on legal duties that override normal client practitioner relationships, like duty to court, legal privilege, money laundering reporting, which are compulsory and mandatory disclosures for a practitioner. So how do you write that? Use a 2-part structure like it is in the first part. Speak to the relevant ethical principles and specific considerations. Then ensure your explanation for objectivity mentions the advocacy threat inherent in forensic work. So the key consideration is the complexity of legal privilege, which is regarding money laundering reporting. This is very, very important. So the B part is replete with a lot of information. Please go through it as you practice and revise, so you'll be able to provide such points under exam condition. Don't forget, forensics is a very important addition to the current syllabus. So take note of all these forensic questions. All right, so for the C part, for proper conclusion of the exercise, set out the reporting requirements of an assurance engagement. Very important. So for the C part on reporting requirements, it's a 5 marks question allocated. 5 marks was allocated to that question. So what do you write? You need to list the standard or the standard mandatory elements of an international standards on assurance engagement report. So focus on the core administrative and technical requirements around the title, the addressee, conclusion, date, and the necessary statements regarding criteria responsibility, and the international standards on assurance engagement compliance. So how do you write that? Just use concise numbered list of 10 items, as you can see on the screen. As per the marking key, you have half mark per point or strategy you provide. So prioritize the most recognizable elements from the international standards on assurance engagements. This is very, very important. So take note of that for the marks. And let's look at general strategies for earning marks, which are applicable to all questions. But specifically for this question, try to strictly adhere. Your strict adherence to marking key structure is very important. So note that the marking guide specifies a split. For the A part, 3 challenges, 1 mark each, and 5 approaches, 1 mark each also, which is for the A part. So your answer must clearly separate the challenges from the approaches and hit the required number, so you could pick the marks. Then the second strategy I would suggest or advise is use of technical language. Using specific terms like advocacy threat, legal privilege, ISAEs, ISQM1, responsible party, suitable criteria. Those are terms that are very important, that resonates with the subject. So try to use those technical terms in submitting your answers. And for the third aspect, the third strategy or advice is try to be concise with your bullet points. So for lists, especially for the A part, which asks us to list, or we have lists in the answer structure, the A and the C part, try to use short, sharp, and distinct bullet points as demonstrated in the answer. So avoid combining ideas or having long read or long points that may be boring for the examiner. Then for the application, for the fourth strategy is application, and mostly it's part B. Part B is primarily part B looks primarily theoretical, but then you need to apply some of the concepts in the case. So try to frame your ethical principles, which is integrity and objectivity, in the context of the forensic investigation and the case, and also the client's problem, speaking to complicity of staff, inadequate reporting. So showing you have linked the theory to the case will earn you these marks very seamlessly. All right, so those are the general strategies I would suggest for earning the marks. It's applicable to every question, but specifically for this question on one client. All right, so the fourth aspect to be looking at is specific guidance of each question based on the marking key. How will you be guided in every question? Be guided by the marking key and try to provide submit your thoughts based on the marking key. Don't forget, you have the marks by the side of the question, so be very conscious of that. So for the guide, the part A speaks to challenges and approach, which is 8 marks. So to earn these marks on challenges, you need to state the need for specialist IT knowledge. State the need categorically for specialist IT knowledge, which is one of the challenges. So you have 1 mark for that. Also mention risks related to outsourcing, which is reliance on third parties like payment gateways. So you get 1 mark for that. Also mention the risk of inappropriate accounting policies. So for example, website capitalization, which is in the case, you also earn 1 mark. And the fourth point you pick is on strategy. Ensure you include the risk of loss of transaction integrity or data security or data privacy. And you pick the 4 marks. So those 4 points on the challenges, your thoughts should center on such submission. Then for the approach to earn the marks, you need to state the necessity of having audit staff with appropriate expertise or hiring a specialist, which will give you 1 mark. And the next point is for you to mention evaluating general and application controls for the system, which will earn you the 2nd mark. The 3rd mark you're supposed to earn is on specifying or specifically or let me use the word specify obtaining detailed knowledge of the client's e-commerce business model, which is very important for your top points. And also mention the consideration of a going concern basis If the business is struggling, actually, we also earn you 1 mark. And the fifth point I could provide is on strategy. Ensure your approach covers the full cycle around planning, risk assessment, control evaluation, and reporting, which are the general approach for approaching such work, audit work, or to even answer the question, very importantly. So that's how to earn the 8 marks, 3 for challenges and 5 for approach, very key. Then for the B part, to earn the marks for ethical principles, you need to state objectivity and link it to avoiding the advocacy threat when investigating for a paying client. That is 1.5 marks, which is 1.5 marks. Then for the second mark, you need to state professional competence and due care and emphasize the specialized nature of forensic work, which will earn you another 1.5 marks. And the third point around strategy, you need to speak clearly and also define all 4 or 5 principles to ensure you score the full 6 marks allocated for the principles. And for the 4 of them, you have 1.5 mark each for 4 principles based on the marking key. So try to practice with this, and your submissions should center around these thoughts. Then for the considerations to earn the marks, there's a crucial point on the accountant's duty to court, or the issue of legal privilege in relation to money laundering reporting, which is 1 mark. So it's very crucial to state that for this case. And the strategy is always address the distinction between normal confidentiality and the overriding legal requirement for disclosure. So for accountants, we have the overriding legal requirements, which is by court, by legal privilege, and issues of money laundering. We have to put aside confidentiality and do the needful. Very important. Then for the part C, which is on reporting requirements, is a 5-mark question. To earn the marks, you need to list 10 distinct administrative elements. You have half mark for that. You need to include title, which is independent, addressee, identification of level of assurance. So for example, reasonable or limited. Also the practitioner's conclusion, suitable criteria used, and the statement of compliance with international standards on assurance engagements and international standards on quality management, and also ethical requirements. So it's a 5-mark question. You do that for the 5 marks, and don't forget the strategy. You try to focus on the content of the opinion paragraph and the introductory and the administrative paragraph of that report. So 10 distinct administrative elements, half mark for each, will earn you 5 marks for your presentation. Very, very important. All right, so please take note of that. Okay, so that's it for this 20-mark question, and I believe it's direct and straight to the point. Okay, so let's move to the next question, which is May 2022 on question 3, which is Tijara Nigeria Limited. It's quite a long read, actually, and we may not have time at this point to read through the answers. You have the questions, so just go through the answers and go through the questions. Let's speak to the answers and how to attack such a question. So we're required to describe the general approach to the assurance work an auditor should consider before accepting the engagement of a reporting accountant on prospective financial information, which is ISAE 3400. The examination of prospective financial information, we have 8 marks for the A part. For the B part, we are asked to detail the procedures applicable to cash flow forecasts for Tijara for the year to December 30th, 2022. We have a whopping 7 marks. And the final part of the question says we should prepare a summarized presentation of what the reporting accountant should consider in forming an opinion on prospective financial information, which is another 5 marks. So we have 20 marks, ladies and gentlemen, for this question. And you see that this question is a direct and high value test of our knowledge of ISAE 3400, which is the examination of prospective financial information, and is a key topic under assurance services, which is chapter 12. And it requires both theoretical understanding of the standards, especially for part A and C, and the practical application of audit procedures to a scenario, which is practically for part B of the question. Okay, so generally I observe that the part A, which is the general approach of the question, is 8 marks. You see that the question asks for the pre-acceptance and planning procedures of a PFI engagement. And the core skill tested here is the ability to adapt general assurance principles, which are competence, resources, engagement letter, to the high-risk nature of forward-looking information around assumptions, actual versus forecast, which management generally assumes. Then for the B part, which is detailed procedures, is 7 marks. You observe that this is the application test based on the scenario, and it requires us to generate specific audit procedures for the risky assumptions detailed in the scenario. So some of the assumptions are sales growth, gross profit change, credit terms change. So those are some of the assumptions. So high scoring answers link the assumption to external evidence gathered. Very important. So please take note of that. Then for the part C, which is forming an opinion, 5 marks. This tests the technical components of the International Standards on Assurance Engagement 3400 report's conclusion. And we'll look at the answer. It focuses on the 3 major components of the opinion, which is the reasonableness of assumptions, the proper preparation of the PFI, and the reporting framework used. So those are my general observation on each part of the question that was tested. Now let's look at how to write and what to write on these answers. So for the A part, what do you write? The A part is the general approach, which is 8 marks. So what do we write? You need to list procedures. Let's go to the answer. We need to list procedures for the A part. We need to list procedures covering 3 stages. Number 1, acceptance, speaking to competence, resources, and independence. And number 2, initial planning, around understanding the entity, the intended use of the approach or the report, and the time scale. And number 3, the specific PFI review, checking assumptions, arithmetic, and also comparing to actual results. So that's what you write. And how do you write it? You need to use a numbered list, like you could see the examiner has submitted or provided in the solution. Use a numbered list, ensuring or ensure you mention accessing whether assumptions are best estimate, which is speaking to forecast, or hypothetical projection. Take note of that. Also, crucially mention that the client must understand the limited nature of the negative assurance given. So you need to aim for 8 points, which you'll be allocated 1 mark for each of those 8 points. Very key. So the answer on the screen is replete with a lot of information on how you should go about that. Then for the B part, what do you write on the detailed procedures, which is 7 marks? You need to break the scenario into 4 risk areas and generate a procedure for each. So the first one is sales growth from the case, which the sales growth projection or forecast is 24%. So vouch the 5% price increase to new price lists. Check the 18% volume increase against market forecast, competitor analysis, or confirmed orders, so that you validate the sales growth. And for the gross profit cost of sales, gross profit is 8% to, gross profit cost of sales, which is 80% to 72%. You need to investigate the cost components around materials, labor, overheads. For the anticipated cost savings, you need to, for example, the supplier codes, the new automation plan. So you need to check that on the gross profit and cost of sales projection. Then for the receivables, which is 93 to 61 days was projected, you need to confirm the new credit terms have been communicated to customers. Also review historical bad debt rates to see if they increase with stricter terms. And for the payables, which is 45 to 90 days, you need to confirm a supplier agreement to the extended terms. You need to assess the going concern, reputational risk of enforcing long payment periods. Very key. So how do you write that? Use bullet points under subheadings, like you could see the examiner did. Use bullet points under subheadings, and that will help you present your thoughts practically. So that would help you to also provide clarity. So use bullet points for subheadings, really for good summation and clarity. So for example, sales price increase procedures. That's one of the points you could provide. So you need to provide at least 7 points, which is 1 mark each, to earn the 7 marks. Okay, so for the C part of the question, which is asking us for summarized opinion considerations, which is 5 marks, what do you write? List the components the accountant verifies before concluding the PFI. PFI's purpose, distribution restrictions, the responsibility statements, which management owns actually. Management owns the PFI assumptions. Also list the reasonableness of the assumptions and the consistency with the framework. So how do you write that? Use a numbered list, as you could see on the screen, of 5 points, which you have 1 mark for each, and ensure the phrase negative assurance is included in connection with the reasonableness of assumptions. Very important. Ensure that phrase on negative assurance is injected in your answer. So general strategies for earning these marks, this is applicable to all questions, but for this question, you need to reference the standard in your answers. Always start your answers with explicitly mentioning the governing standard, which is ISAE 3400, as this immediately shows the examiner you know the framework. That's very important. Secondly, you need to focus on negative assurance, which is a distinguishing feature for prospective financial information reporting. And it's also the conclusion, being negative assurance, speaking to a phrase like nothing has come to our attention, blah, 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 rather than positive assurance. Mention this in your discussion and submission of your answers where appropriate. And number 3 strategy I would suggest is use scenario facts in the procedures. So for like the part B, I used some scenarios like tailoring to the specifics of Tijara. So for example, the 24% sales increase, the 61-day debtor period or receivables period, the 90-day payable period, and foreign sales. So generic procedures we actually score low, but applicable or application procedures tailored to the scenario will score you very high. So please take note of that. So the next area we should take note of is the marking key. Let's speak to the marking key now. It's a 20-mark question totally. Then let's look at each marking key and how to address some of these concepts and principles. So for the part A, which is the general approach, the marking key provides 8 marks. So to earn the marks, you see that the key is coverage across the planning spectrum, which includes in submitting your answers, just to remind you to revise these answers. The key is coverage across the planning horizon, which includes knowledge of the entity and its environment, number 1, assessing the basis of assumptions, speaking to best estimate and hypothetical scenario. Number 3, checking arithmetical accuracy and consistency. Number 4th point to earn the 4th mark is reviewing the actual results for an expired part of the forecast period. And number 5, obtaining a management representation letter, especially regarding responsibility for assumptions, which is management's responsibility. And number 7 point, determine the intended use and restricted distribution of the report. Very important. So 7 points, you could build on the 8th one to earn the 8 marks. For the part B, which is on detailed procedures, we have 7 marks. So to earn these marks, procedures must be specific to the numbers and circumstances. So the first assumption is sales growth. You need to obtain and verify market research reports or industry data to support the 18% volume increase. Also inspect foreign currency risk management for foreign sales. Very key. And number 2 is the gross profit, which is cost reduction. Obtain cost schedules and supplier agreements to confirm the reduction in material costs. Number 3 is receivables. You have 61 days. You need to review the system and controls for implementing the 1% discount and verify the new standard 60-day credit communication. Very key. Also, the payables, which is 90 days, you need to discuss with the purchasing manager to confirm supplier willingness to accept 90-day term. That's like 3 months, which may be hard. Discuss with the supplier purchasing manager to confirm that suppliers will accept 3 months, 90 days terms and assess any resulting price increase risk or supply chain risks. Very, very important. So that's how to earn the 7 marks some of this on this particular B part of the question. Then for the C part, which is the summarized opinion considerations, is 5 marks. So to earn the marks, you need to focus on the formal elements of the International Standards on Assurance Engagement 3400 opinion paragraph. Number 1 is a statement that management is responsible for the PFI and the assumptions. Number 2 is an assessment of whether the assumptions provide a reasonable basis for the PFI. This is the core negative assurance point. Number 3 is a conclusion on whether the PFI is properly prepared and presented according to the relevant financial reporting framework. And number 4 is a mandatory reference to the purpose or restricted distribution of the report, or those that we use, the intended users of the report. Very important. And finally, a statement that the report is issued in accordance with ISAE 3400. So that's practically how you earn the 5 marks in this C part of the question. This is very key. So take note of that. All right, so that will be the end of this question, this 20-mark question on Tijara Nigeria Limited. Okay, so let's move to the next question, which is May 2021, question 2 on Dogba Associates. All right, not quite a long read, but then we don't have time. So you have the questions. Let's look at the requirements. Let's look at what we are required to do. So you could see that the audit firm has asked that you handle the engagement. In preparing for the engagement, you are required to do the following. Number 1, explain the matters as required by International Standards on Quality Management 1 and International Standards on Assurance Engagement 3400, which you will consider before accepting the engagement, to review and report on the client's prospective financial information. 6 marks. B, assuming you choose to accept the engagement, recommend the examination procedures to be performed in respect of the review of prospective profit or loss information. 9 marks. C, prepare an extract of an unmodified report that the auditor could issue on the prospective financial information. 5 marks. So we have a 20-mark question here, ladies and gentlemen. So you see that this question is highly focused on PFIs, Prospective Financial Information Assurance, which is governed by ISAE 3400, and the firm's quality management system, which is governed by ISQM1. So it perfectly integrates technical acceptance, planning requirements with the formal output of the engagement, speaking to the report. Very, very key. Right, so for the A part of the question, my general observations on the A, the B, the C part of the question is that the part A speaks to acceptance matters, and it's a dual standard question. Take note of that. And it's testing both the firm's overall quality management system, we just spoke to that on ISQM1, and the specific requirements for accepting a PFI engagement, ISAE 3400. And if you look at the solution on the screen, practically you see that the solution provides separate and 2 sets of requirements for these 2 standards. Then for the B part asks us on examination procedures. This is a long list question, which is 9 marks allocated to that question, and it tests detailed knowledge of the procedures applied to PFIs. So the focus for us is on verifying management's underlying assumptions and data rather than historical transactions. So the answer, if you look at the B part of the answer, you will see that The B part provides us with, or the pre-part provides us with a wide range of relevant procedures we should read and practice with. And for the C part on the unmodified report extract, the C part on the unmodified report extract, this is a structured report writing exercise. And the key elements are the negative assurance statement and the mandatory disclaimer about actual results differing from the forecasted information. So the marking guide shows marks are awarded for structure and specific content blocks. So take note of that very importantly. All right, so let's go back to how and first what we should write and how we should write it, which is our second concern. So for the A part on acceptance matters, that is 6 marks, don't forget. What do you write? You need to first list the 4 core firm level requirements from ISQM1. So the first is you need to list that 4 core firm level requirements based on international standards on quality management. Number 1 is competence. Number 2 is capabilities, the resources, human and financial. Number 3 is ethical compliance. And number 4 is client integrity. So those are the 4 core firm level requirements from the ISQM1. Secondly, you need to list the specific project level requirements based on ISAE 3400, which is time scale, fee agreement. If you look at the answer, it's replete with that. Time scale, I said the first one, fee agreement, second one, and specific expertise. So how do you write that? You need to use 2 distinct numbered subsections for ISQM1. As you can see on the screen, the examiner has provided a clear structure on that. The first one is on ISQM and the second one is on ISAE. So ensure you clearly state the purpose of checking client integrity, which is the risk of management misrepresenting the forecast, as this is a high-risk engagement around going public via capital markets. So aim for 6 distinct points, and the 6 distinct points, you earn 1 mark for each of those points. Then for the B part, what do you write? Which is for examination procedures and is a whopping 9 marks. So you need to write around the procedures, focusing on the reliability and reasonableness of the prospective financial information. Include steps related to the PFI's purpose, speaking to the intended use and distribution, speak to the nature of the assumptions also around best estimate versus hypothetical, and also checking arithmetical consistency, that is comparing to historical data and historical results, and also assessing management's competence and judgments based on this estimate. So how do you write that? You see that the B part is replete with a list. So use a numbered list of at least 9 points, and you have 1 mark each for any of those 9 points. And begin by stating the need to understand the nature and intended use of the PFI. Also ensure the procedures cover both the inputs, talking about data and assumptions, and the process, talking about arithmetic accuracy and consistency. Very important on what or how to write. And for the C part, on the modified report extract, which is 5 marks, what do you write? You need to center your thoughts on the C part around the report extract. You must state that the report extract must contain 5 key mark earning components around the title, addressee, management responsibility for the forecast and assumptions, the auditor's opinion, which is negative assurance, and the mandatory disclaimer, speaking to the actual results will differ from the forecast, and also the closing, which is the signature, dates, and address of the auditor. So how do you write that? You need to present your answer using the formal structure of a report. Ensure the opinion sentence uses the specific negative assurance phrasing. Like in the last question, we said a phrase around nothing has come to our attention which causes us to believe blah, 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 blah. And that the disclaimer about the difference between actual and forecasted results is included as a separate paragraph. This is very important for you to write in your answers. Very key. Okay, so general strategies for ending marks for this question is try to be number one, standard specificity. Always cite ISQM 1 and ISAE 3400 when discussing acceptance, planning, reporting procedures for PFI. This is mandatory to earn your full marks. Very important. So in practicing, try to practice with this so that you could remember under exam condition. Number two is highlight the negative assurance. So when discussing the opinion, especially for part C, explicitly note that the PFI reports give negative assurance. Around that phrase, I said, nothing has come to our attention, blah, 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 because of the inherent uncertainty of future events. And number three is use the formal report structure for the ISAE report content. So for the report extract, which is part C, maintain the exact sequence and phrasing of an ISAE report around title, addressee, responsibility, opinion, disclaimer. So follow the structure the examiner provided, as you can see on the screen, to submit your thoughts on this section. All right, so let's go to the marking key now, which is our last evaluation. The marking key, which will guide us for each question based on the marking key. So for the part A, the acceptance matters is 6 marks. So to earn these marks judiciously, you need to ensure you cover both the firm and the engagement factors. So ISQM1 speaks to competence, that is ability to perform. Resources, staff, and time should be available. Ethical compliance around independence of the auditor. Then client integrity is a reputation of the client. So you need to ensure both firm and engagement factors are presented in your answers to earn the 6 marks. Next is the ISAE 3400. You need to determine the intended use and distribution. So for example, it's only for the capital market offer based on this case. Also, after the intended use and distribution, the time scale is important to note and the ability to comply with ISAE 3400. So you should submit your thoughts around this on the ISQM1 standard and also the ISAE 3400 standard to earn the 6 marks practically. Then for the marking key on the 9-mark question, which is part B on examination procedures, you need to earn your marks by submitting your thoughts around the focus on the judgmental and forward-looking aspects of the examination procedure. Number one is evaluate as the auditor if the underlying assumptions are reasonable and adequately supported by evidence. So for example, market data is an evidence that supports some of these assumptions. And number two is the auditor needs to determine if the PFI reflects the full impact of the assumptions based on consistency. And number 3 point is you need to assess the competence and experience of management in preparing PFIs. This is very important. Number 4 is you need to check the sensitivity of the results to key assumptions around what-if scenarios, for example. And number 5 is verify the mathematical accuracy and proper basis of preparation. So, for example, the accounting policies used and all that. And finally, compare historical financial information to the assumptions used. So, for example, historical margin versus the forecasted margin. If there are any dichotomies, you need to flag it. Very important. Then for the part C, the unmodified report extract is 5 marks. To earn the marks, the mark breakdown, as you can see on the screen, is specific for the part C. The title addressee is 1.5 mark. So, for example, report on financial forecast to the board of directors should be your title and addressee. Number 2 is the scope and first paragraph, which will earn you 1 mark. Reference to ISAE 3400 is very important, and the period covered should be inserted in the scope and that first paragraph to earn the 1 mark. Then for management responsibility, which is 1 mark, you need to state management own the forecast, including the assumptions. The auditor is just reviewing. So management owns the forecast. Take note of that. Number 4 is the opinion and the body. The core negative assurance statement, which is very important. Speaking to nothing has come to our attention, which causes us to believe that these assumptions do not provide a reasonable basis. So that's 1 mark for the opinion and the body. The next point is the disclaimer. number 1 mark. The disclaimer is the warning that actual results will differ and the variation may be material. You need to state that unequivocally, very importantly. And the closing is half mark for the firm's name, the signature, and the date. That needs to be stated to earn the 5 marks fully, as you can see, as allocated in the marking guide. This is very important. All right, so that's it for this question on Dogba and Associates. Let's run. We have a few minutes left. This review is for 1 hour. This podcast series is just for 1 hour for this chapter 11. All right, so let's look at this next question on May 2021, which is question 5, Judy Nigeria Limited. Quite a short read, but we may not have time to really go through the question right now. So you have the question, so please read it and decipher what it's important in the context or the scenario. So we're required to, number 1, distinguish between forensic accounting, forensic investigation, and forensic audit, which is 6 marks. And the B part, we are to identify the various government agencies associated with forensic auditing. We have 4 marks. The C part is apply the fundamental ethical principles to forensic auditors' engagement, 5 marks. And the D part is describe the procedures to be adopted by an auditor in a forensic audit, 5 marks. So we have a 20-mark question, ladies and gentlemen, here, and forensics is a significant addition to the new dispensation or the new syllabus. So take note of this question in your practice. And don't forget, this question is an essential test of forensic accounting, which is a specialized field often tested in the AAAF structure or paper. And it requires strong definitional clarity, institutional knowledge within the Nigerian context, ethical application, and also procedural understanding of this concept. So this question brought a lot of them from the A to D part of the question. So generally, you observe from this question that the part A speaks to distinctions. This is testing the hierarchy of forensic terms. Forensic accounting, which is the umbrella. Forensic investigation is the mission. And forensic audit is the method or the tool. So we'll look at the answers that provide a clear structural breakdown and gives us 1 mark each for distinct and valid explanations. The B part on the agencies, it tests our knowledge of the Nigerian legal and regulatory landscape related to fraud and financial crime. So we'll look at the answer, which correctly lists the key bodies or statutory bodies that are in this ecosystem. Then part C is the ethical principles. This is a direct test of the ICAN or IFAC code of ethics applied to an advocacy investigative role. The key is linking the principles, especially objectivity and confidentiality, to the specific risks in the case of litigation and investigative pressure. And for the part D, you observe that it asks us on procedures. It tests the methodology of a forensic investigation, particularly one aimed at assessing auditor negligence. And the procedures must therefore focus on reviewing the previous audit's quality, the working papers, reperforming tests, and etc., etc. All right, so those are general observations in the question. Now let's go down to specifics on how to and what to write, or what to and how to write. So for the part A, the prompt is we should distinguish. So the distinctions are very important, which is 6 marks. What do we write? Start with the general definition of forensic accounting. So let's look at the answers. Start with the general definitions of forensic accounting as the examiner has provided, using accounting for legal purposes. That's generally the use of forensic accounting, is the use of accounting for legal purposes. So start with the general definition, then define forensic investigation as the specific engagement to prove or disprove allegations. And this is reactive in nature, actually. And finally, define forensic audit as the specific procedures, methods used to gather evidence within the investigation. This is very important. So how do you write that? Use separate bold headings for each term and try to emphasize that forensic accounting is the broad field, and the other two, which is forensic investigation and forensic audit, are its components. So forensic accounting is like the mother, then the children are forensic investigation and forensic audit. So ensure you mention the focus on court of law or legal dispute resolution, which is very important. Then for the part B of the question, the prompt is for us to identify. Don't forget. So the government agencies we are to identify, we are given our allocated 4 marks for this question. So what do you write? List the 4 most prominent Nigerian government agencies involved in fighting financial crime or mandating special investigations. So the answer, you have a lot on the screen. So work on them, memorize them. And how do you write that? Use a numbered list, as you could see, of at least 4 agencies, and you have 1 mark for each. So prioritize EFCC, ICPC, FIRS, CBN, NDIC for maximum relevance. There are others, but these are the ones you should prioritize, very important. Then for the C part, which is more of ethical principles, which is 5 marks. What do you write? You need to list the 5 fundamental ethical principles around integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. So for each of these principles, you need to provide a brief application to the forensic context. So how do you write that? Use a numbered list, as the examiner has done on the screen. Use a numbered list to end the mark, which is 1 mark per principle, and it demands both the identification and the brief explanation of the application. You see, the most crucial link is objectivity, which must overcome the advocacy threat, being paid to prove negligence based on the case. This is very key, so take note of that. Then for the D part, the procedures to perform. So what do you write around this question, which is for 5 marks? The procedures must be specific to the objective, and the objective is determining auditor negligence. So you should include establishing objectives, which is determining if prior audit met the international standards on auditing. Number 2 is planning, the scope and definition. Number 3 is evidence gathering. You need to review the working papers, and you need to interview former audit team or management on this. Number 4 is reperforming maybe key audit tests. And finally, number 5 is reporting your conclusion on the negligence allegation, and also the ISAs non-compliant or that were not complied with in the exercise or the engagement. So how do you write that? Use a numbered list of at least 5 sequential steps, and you have 1 mark for each. So ensure the steps reflect a high-level review of the prior audit process against required standards, which is the ISAs. This is very important. So generally, these strategies for earning the marks will help you to take note of how to answer such a question. Number 1 is prioritize definitions, which is for part A. Always write a complete formal explanation before differentiating the terms. If you look at the examiner's report, the examiner noted a pitfall here. So try to use precise and distinct language in your definitions. Very important. And number 2 is the Nigerian context, which is the part B part of the question. When identifying government agencies, ensure you list the major local agencies like EFCC, ICPC, FIRS. As the marking key explicitly expects this local knowledge from your answers or submission. Very important. Number 3 is application in ethics, which is the part C of the question. When explaining the fundamental ethical principles, always tailor the explanation to the specific risks of the forensic engagement. So, for example, the pressure to find fault against the previous auditor, and that challenges objectivity of the forensic investigator. This is very important. And number 4 is the procedural structure for part D of the question. The forensic procedures should follow a distinct investigation flow around acceptance, planning, evidence gathering, and reporting. This is very important and you need to take note of that. Then for the specific guidance for each question based on the marking key, you see that the part A speaks to distinctions, and the part A speaks to or asks us for distinctions. So let's look at the marking guide. Distinctions or differences, the prompt says distinguish. All right, so any of those synonyms will suffice. So for the part A, it's 6 marks. We have to distinguish the differences between 3 of them. So for a forensic accounting, we have 2 marks. We said for a forensic accounting is actually the mother or the umbrella term, which involves preparing financial data for legal proceedings or dispute resolutions. It encompasses both investigation and litigation support. You earn 2 marks if you submit those thoughts. Then for forensic investigation, which is also 2 marks, forensic investigation is the specific engagement or mandate. It's actually reactive, and it's aimed at proving or disapproving a special or specific allegation. So, for example, fraud, negligence. And the objective of forensic investigation is to gather evidence for legal action. And the next one is forensic audit, which is 2 marks. The methodology, procedures, so for example, data mining, tracing funds, used to obtain the evidence within a forensic investigation. So the methodologies and procedures are very important to earn the 2 marks. For those 3 concepts and distinctions you should provide. You could also provide your answers in a table. It's fine if you like. And for the part B, government agencies, which is 4 marks. To earn marks, you need to list any 4 agencies empowered to conduct or order financial investigations. We have the EFCC, the ICPC, the NFIU, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIRS, CBN, and NDIC. So any 4 you list will earn you the 4 marks. Then the part C is 5 marks, also ethical principles. To earn the marks, you need to provide the principle and its relevance to this Judy scenario on auditor negligence. So for objectivity, the auditor must, or the investigator must remain independent and impartial despite being hired by the management of Judy to find negligence. So avoid the advocacy threat. Very important. The auditor needs to avoid advocacy threat. Then for confidentiality, the auditor must protect client information unless disclosure is legally mandated, such as providing evidence in a court of law, which is an exception to the rule of confidentiality. And for professional competence, the investigator must have the specialized skills, must have the knowledge of ISAEs, the legal framework, investigation skills to assess the prior auditor's work and to check for that negligence that was alleged. Then for the D part, which is procedures, on 5 marks, to earn the 5 marks, the procedures must address the negligence allegation. And number 1 is define the scope and objective by establishing the specific ISAs, the standards against which the prior audit will be judged. That's the job of the investigator or the forensic investigator in this case. Number 2 is he needs to review prior audit working papers. He needs to examine the nature, the timing, and extent of procedures performed by M&M's auditor based on this case. Number 3 is interview. He needs to interview and obtain evidence. He needs to interview the prior M&M team that carried out the audit, and the managing partners or the engagement partners regarding the scope, limitations, or dispute based on the case. Number 4 is he needs to reperform key tests. He needs to reevaluate high-risk areas around valuation of acquired assets, goodwill impairment, to assess if a material misstatement was drafted. And number 5, the draft expert witness report, which is the final point. He needs to prepare a report concluding whether the audit work was performed with professional skepticism and in line or compliance with ISAs. This is very, very important. All right, so that's it for this next question. Let's look at the last one and we'll shut down for this session. And the last one is on XVS PLC. Quite a long read, but then we just speak to the answers practically. So we're required to develop a work plan necessary for the task in accordance with the requirements of ISAE 3400, which is the examination of PFIs. We have 5 marks for the A part. For the B part, we are to evaluate the considerations to be made and the procedures to be followed before accepting the engagement in accordance with ISAE 3400. You also have 5 marks. And number 3 is to prepare an outline of the report to be presented on the engagement, which is 10 marks. We have a open 20-mark question here, ladies and gentlemen. And you observe from this question that it's almost a pure theory test of ISAE 3400 because the scenario speaks to raising capital to counter declining fortunes, if you read the case, and also highlights the high risk and public interest nature of the engagement, which should influence the auditor's acceptance and reporting considerations. All right, so generally you observe from each of these questions and also the answers. If you look at it, you see that from these questions, the A part speaks to the work plan, and we allocated 5 marks for that. It asks for the structure and initial steps. So the examiner expects an answer combining the necessary ISAE 3400 guidance, speaking to what PFI is and the output, with the initial planning acceptance steps around resources, fees, and engagement letter. Then the part B speaks to acceptance, considerations, and procedures, which is 5 marks. And this specifically targets the pre-engagement and initial planning phase. The B part actually tests, or the B part specifically targets the pre-engagement and initial planning phase. It tests the necessary checks on client integrity and the firm's competence to handle a high-profile, high-risk capital raising engagement. And for the C part, you also observe that the report outline is 10 marks. This is a structure and I think a memorization test because the report is the final output. And every component talking about the title, responsibility, negative assurance, disclaimer must be included to score a high mark allocation from the 10 marks. Okay, so having observed that, let's look at what to and how to write very briefly. So for the part A, which is the development of a work plan, we have 5 marks for that. So what do you write? Now from the answers on the screen, you need to write around the work plan, which is the document that outlines the entire process. It must start with the scope. So try to reference ISAE 3400 and the PFI being examined. Then you list the key steps required before field work begins. And some of these steps required is number 1, determining resource needs around expertise, human and financial. Also agreeing on the fee and time frame, and also clarifying the intended use of the report, which is mainly in this case raising capital, and also obtaining an engagement letter. Everything must be written, or else it is not done. Don't forget. So how do you write that? You need to present the answer as a structured sequence. So ensure at least one point explicitly mentions the need for staff with the necessary expertise, given the technology focus. And another mentions agreeing on the form of the report, which includes negative assurance. So that's what to write for this A part. So the examiner's answers are there. You practice and resolidify and also revise with this to catch the understanding of this PFI question. So for the B part, which is acceptance and considerations and procedure, which is 5 marks. What do you write? Focus on the initial checks. So the considerations are based on ISQM, the international standards on quality management system, and the ethical system or ethical practices. The firm's competence and resources, which is expertise in technology, capital markets, independence, and integrity of XBS management. Due to past shareholders' issues or dissent with the management. So that's replete in the case. Then for the procedures, you need to obtain knowledge of the entity. Obtaining knowledge of the entity and its crisis background is very important. Also establishing the intended use of the report, which is public capital raising, and understanding whether the PFI uses best estimates or hypothetical assumption in this case. So how do you write that? Use distinct bullet points. Since the allocation is 5 marks for both considerations and procedures, aim for a balance. So to speak, the balance around 2 to 3 considerations, 2 to 3 procedures, so that you could pick the 5 marks seamlessly. And don't forget, the high-risk nature of the engagement around shareholder pressure, market decline should be reflected in the rigor of the acceptance criteria. This is key. Then for the C part, which is reporting, the C part, the reporting outline for the PFI engagement. What do you write? You need to list the standard mandatory components of an ISAE 3400 report in the sequential order. Several questions we've looked at has this, and this must include the title, speaking to the independent report, and the addressee, the shareholders, the board. Number 2 is the identification of the PFI examined. Number 3 is the statement of management's responsibility for the PFI and assumptions. Number 4 is the auditor's responsibility to express an opinion. Number 5 is, very importantly, making reference to ISAE 3400's compliance in this report. Very key. Number 6, very important also, is the opinion paragraph containing the negative assurance statement. We've stated that very explicitly and continuously in the previous questions, and it's the same that is tested here. That negative assurance statement on the reasonableness of assumptions and the opinion on proper preparation, which is consistent with the framework, must be stated. Nothing has come to our attention, blah, 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 blah. Then number 7 is the warning, the disclaimer, that actual results will differ and may be potentially material. So that warning and disclaimer should be stated by the auditor. Number 8 is the purpose and the restriction for capital raising should be stated. And finally, the date, the signature, and address. So how do you write that? Use a numbered list of 8 to 10 items, 1 mark per point. And each point should represent a major paragraph or required statement in the report structure. This is very important. So general strategies for earning the marks for specifically this question. You need to strictly adhere to ISAE 3400 since the standard is cited in every part. So you use the terminologies around, for example, best estimate assumptions, hypothetical assumptions, and negative assurance consistently in your answers. Also, number 2, separate acceptance and planning. So in part A and B, ensure a clear distinction between acceptance considerations, which is pre-engagement at firm's level, and the actual work, talking about the plan and the procedures, which is post-acceptance, which is the field level work, are separated very clearly. And number 3 is the comprehensive report outline, which is the C part of the question, and has significant 10 marks allocated to that question. So the report outline must be exhaustive. So include all administrative responsibility, scope, conclusion paragraph required by the standards, as we've seen, as we shared some thoughts on that. This is very important. Okay, so finally, let's look at the marking guide. It's a 20-mark question. So the marking guide for the part A provides 5 marks for development of work plan. So to earn these marks, you need to focus on the ISAE's structure. So the first thing is, number 1, reference to ISAE 3400 is very important. You can't compromise that as the governing standard and scope. Number 2, check that the firm has adequate resources, expertise around workforce allocation for this job. Very key. Also, number 3, agreeing the fee and timeline around administration of the job is very key. Number 4 is establishing the intended use. And in this case is for public capital raising and potential distribution restriction. And to pick the 5th mark, obtaining the signed engagement letter. If it is not documented, don't forget it is not done. So that's how you pick 5 marks for the A part of the question. Then part B, on acceptance, consideration, and procedures, you have 5 marks allocated. So to earn these 5 marks, you need to balance the answer between firm risk and PFI characteristics. So number 1 is consideration. You need to assess the integrity of management, given the shareholder pressure and need for a second opinion on this matter. Number 2 is also consideration, but around ensuring the firm has competence in technology and capital market engagements. Very key. Number 4, around the procedure. Number 3, around the procedure. You need to obtain knowledge of the entity, the reason for the decline, the market risks associated based on data provided. Very important. Another procedure is to determine whether the assumptions are best estimate, which is forecast, or hypothetical, which is projection. Another procedure, or any another mark, is assess the adequacy of the underlying data used by the consultant. Very key. Okay, so that's how to earn the 5 marks and some thoughts around the points to submit. And for the part C, which is the last part, the outline of the report, which is 10 marks. To earn that 10 marks, ensure all 10 structural elements are present in your submission. Number 1 is the title around the independent auditor's report. Number 2 is the addressee, the stakeholder, the relevant stakeholders you are addressing the report to, the board of directors. Number 3, identification of the PFI and the period covered. Number 4, the statement of management responsibility. Management is responsible for the assumptions, for PFI and the assumptions clearly. Number 5, always reference ISAE 3400. Make reference to ISAE 3400. Number 6, the negative assurance statement. Assumptions provide a reasonable basis, and that phrase on nothing has come to our attention is the negative assurance statement that should be provided in the structural elements. And number 7 is the opinion on proper preparation based on assumptions and the frameworks. Number 8 is warning that actual results, that disclaimer, the warning, the disclaimer must be provided that states that actual results will differ from projections and it may not be achieved, and it may be material. Don't forget that. Number 9 is the statement regarding the purpose, the restricted distribution of the report. And finally, the date, the signature, and address of the practitioner. All right, so that's it for this question on the March-June 2020 question 5, XBS PLC. So ladies and gentlemen, that will be the end of our question and answer podcast for chapter 12, Assurance Services. So I hope you practice with this, and I believe it will resonate with you and help you to practice for exam day. All right, see you guys in the next podcast, which is on internal audit and outsourcing, chapter 13. And until then, bye for now.